ladies and gentlemen, I am Admiral Ellis, and welcome back to The Zombie Train, episode number 315. And this week we're taking a question from Dean. It's actually a great question, because I don't get to talk about it all that much, although I bring it up from time to time. He wrote on episode 249, how did operations between Zombie Train and Beta Rail play out? So, it is actually a really good question. There were a number of times where we worked together. The first being in New Orleans during Firefall, which I mentioned a couple of episodes ago. And that was the first time we'd actually met in person. It's funny, Wybold and I had been friends for so long online, but living as far apart as we did, when, we never got the chance to go across country to see one another. It just so happened to be that he started coming further east, and I had to make a trip down to New Orleans, and we ran into one another, which, it was really well timed, honestly, because I'm not sure we could have done it without them, and I'm not sure they could have done it without us. I'm not sure what would have happened, honestly, and I'm not sure I want to think about it too much. That's a lot that I'm not sure about. But how did it play out? I mean, Firefall, we managed to get everyone evacuated onto the ships, get the ships moving, and we'll get one of the ships moving at least, and then evacuate ourselves in the face of this massive hurricane. But it was kind of chaotic, well, of course, because of the storm, but we had a mechanical failure with the locomotive, and they were able to pull us out of New Orleans, basically. We were still running, but not very well. We had the cylinder head shoot off the front of the train, or the front of the engineer's side cylinder on 3254, and I'm not sure if it embedded itself or it went straight through the electrical cabinet on the back end of Beta Rail's caboose. I remember they had these, major electrical problems because we basically fired off a dinner plate-sized piece of metal at them, not meaning to. But, yeah, that was one of the biggest mechanical failures we had on that trip. Partially because there were some issues with it, and we tried a really ad hoc fix while we were out in like the Blue Hills. We were way out there. We didn't have access to a lot of stuff that we otherwise would have used in the foundry. The foundry was doing foundry things, but it didn't yet have the capability to do everything. So, yeah. That was that, and then we went our separate ways, and we didn't see each other again until we were in Portland, which then we had to save their butts because they came into town and they lost their brakes. And we had to race them. We were in the Jeep, I think. We had to race them to a bridge and lower the bridge because they could not stop in time. When we knew they were coming, but they didn't tell us that they had no brakes until it was a little bit late in the game, honestly. Although, admittedly, I don't think they knew. They had kind of persistent brake problems because of one of the things that they had done really early on in order to reduce strain on their brake system. They inverted it. So with air, they put the brakes on, and without air, you took the brakes off. I'm pretty sure that was to get things moving because they were having compressor problems. I don't really know the logic there, but that's what they did. For most of their stock, at least. So, yeah, they bailed us out, and then we had to bail them out, and then there was a lot of bit of chaos around there because we had we called him the Messenger. It was just a little bit of a cryptic name for the guy, but he was one of the people that were living in Seattle and that were fleeing this oncoming storm of the band of Guardians who were coming down from Canada because they were trying to establish themselves a little bit more. We had run into them coming over Marias Pass, as you probably know, but they were basically the mob. Not that they evolved from them, but that's sort of how they operated. And so they had some trouble with Seattle, and they had also had poor relations with the U.S. Navy, which as I understand, they were trying to cultivate relations, and they basically decided that it wasn't going anywhere, and they sacked the city of Seattle. Then they were on their way down to do the same thing with Portland, and then on their way down, basically gathering strength to do an assault on San Francisco Bay and basically cut off their supposed enemies at the head. So, this was where the most teamwork came in terms of working with Beta Rail until the Zombie Train Incorporated started. But we found out that they were coming down after working it out of this guy, and they had pretty well telegraphed their assault. I don't think too many people were taking them seriously. I'm not sure the Navy had, I'm not sure they were either taking them seriously or I'm not sure if they had known, but they definitely didn't know about what happened in Seattle. We knew that they were coming to Portland. The Navy did not, to my knowledge. So we needed to get down there fast. And 3254 was laid up. It was already coming apart, literally. They were dismantling it to do a major rebuild in the shops in Portland. Which Portland was a fairly well-defended city at this point in time because the Navy had gotten pretty far east of there. So we didn't really have to worry about zombies at all. Some of the coastal towns, though, were still in trouble, and so we had sent Oswald and Carolyn out in the 040 to the emergency locomotive out along the old Tillamook branch to see if they could get through to the other side, because that was one of the places where we hadn't heard anything from, and we wanted to look into moving our operations there because we knew that the Band of Guardians were coming and we would not be able to vacate the facility with all of our stuff and get south in time. We could dodge them and go, do that, but we wouldn't be able to get all the way south in time to get out of their way. That's at least what we determined. So, they went out, they managed to get across the washouts. How they did that, I'm not totally sure, but they are incredibly resourceful, and they took a couple flat cars worth of beams and nails and stuff like that. To my knowledge, they built a lot of makeshift trestles, or managed to get enough dirt in to fill some of these holes. And I know some of them were quite significant, so that's why I was surprised. Although I later did learn that they did a not insignificant amount of it on foot. But they had left to do that at the very beginning, because there were some things out there that I wanted to get my hands on. So they left, and it's not like we sent them out there to do that, but they became an option, or, we sent them out there to scout for us to go out there, but that became the option that we ended up going with. So, timeline of events is we roll into Portland. They leave to go and scout the Tillamook branch and get all the way down to the airplane hangar for not just supplies, but also we kind of wanted to get our hands on some of these planes. And it was also a dirigible hangar. And I wasn't sure if the Navy was using that as a storage for, or as a base for some of the decor, which they were not. I was hoping they were. So as you guys go down to Tillamook, see what you can see. If you can get in contact with the Navy that way, that would be just as well. If not, come back here by whatever method possible and let us know what's going on. So they did manage to make it through to the other side. Again, I think they got the locomotive through, but I'm not totally certain. They might have done it in such a way that they were not able to get back with the locomotive, which is why they did what they did, which is they took one of these planes and they flew it to us, and they dropped a message to us telling us the situation. That was ingenious by them. Also incredibly risky, and I don't know why they didn't just come back the right way. Anyway, so there was no Navy presence there, but we found it suitable to evacuate the shops and everything and the community there to get them out of the way of the band of guardians, because at that point we knew they were coming. At the same time, we had been preparing 4449 for a run down to San Francisco, because that was the fastest engine that we had. And this was a very last-minute thing, with Beta Rail having trouble, and us not wanting to use 18 for this sprint, and 3254 basically in pieces. We didn't have any engines, and 4449, unfortunately, is an oil burner, or was an oil burner, and that was, I felt bad. I felt bad, but we had to tear the burner out and basically make a makeshift firebox, or makeshift coal firebox. It was not pretty. It was not very good, but it was better than nothing. And we, hollowed out the tender, and we made this sprint with, 6 people. 2 people shoveling, because we did not have a stoker, and we had to make significant speed. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get down there in time to get the Navy up there in time to stop them from ransacking the city. But we did instigate, by running down there also, 4449 was out of commission for a little while after that. I'll just put it that way. It was not pretty what we had to do to that engine, and I feel bad about it to this day, but I don't know what else we could have done. We couldn't have gotten out to Tillamook to grab a plane to fly out there, and we didn't have a way to communicate with Oswald and Carolyn to tell them to fly down there. So we had to make that run. We did some damage to 4449's firebox, not just with the really ad hoc fuel changeover, but also with the running it like a madman. We went down there. We had 2 people shoveling in the cab, Weibold as fireman, myself as engineer, and someone else as navigator, and somebody else as switchman. Well, we had a navigator and a switchman as well. So, But we got down there, they actually listened to us, which was the most miraculous part of the whole thing, and they then, massed their forces and, marched on Portland, basically, with a huge portion of the D Corps, so it was 15 or 20 blimps, or dirigibles, blimps and dirigibles, and because they were fighting people, it was, all the, they pulled out all the stops. They brought, what did they bring? They had something for bombardment. They brought some ship up. I'm not sure if it was a regular fuel, diesel-powered ship, but they did work one up to bring it there for shore bombardment. And, God, that was, we got to go back and witness part of that battle, but that's something I can talk about another time. that was the operation we did with Beta Rail. Then they went off to work with the Navy, and they were defending the transcontinental routes when they were lost, and then we went and found them later. That was the assault on Annex. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is the Admiral, signing off.